Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you all here for the start of our fall series in the adult forum. Of course, we'll be talking about faith in the public square. I invite you to sit up at these front tables if you are so predisposed to do that. We're going to be opening, of course, with Father Manoj, who's going to be talking about the challenge of being political without being partisan. I really do encourage you all to pick up the flyer that is available. It's in the parish hall, whether it's also in the church, and just read over what is said there and what we are attempting to have happen during these discussions. One thing I just want to just lift up to you here is that this one paragraph of utmost importance is that we listen actively and attentively, hear what someone is saying rather than immediately try to formulate your response. Now, we will have differing opinions, and that is great. The body of Christ is made up of many parts. I invite you to attend these sessions with an open mind. And we seek to have a safe, respectful place where we can say what is on our heart. We do not come to convince or to condemn. We come as a community to share and to learn. So that is the framing idea of these conversations. Also, if you are interested in having a copy of the pamphlet on the City of God, which we will be discussing at the end of October, please fill out, sign your name on a sign-up sheet that we will have at the back of the hall so we can make sure to order some copies ahead of time so you can have that available to you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Father Manoj.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, it is to you all hearts are open, all desires are known, and from whom no secrets are hid. Cleanse the thoughts of our hearts by the inspiration of thy Holy Spirit, that we may perfectly love thee and worthily magnify thy holy name through Christ our Lord. Amen. So today, what I'd like to do is offer some formal words. So it's going to be more formal than I'm used to doing. And sometimes when it's more formal, it becomes a little bit more convoluted in my mind and maybe in yours. But I definitely invite you to write down questions, ask questions as you need to ask them. And also, in the vein of what Dion was talking about, I'd actually like to promote conversation. I will say, growing up in the Episcopal Church as a youngster, you know, I'm gonna frame it in the way that we all carry with us our epistemic lens. We all carry with us a perception of things, a scheme of things that is shaped by environment, by family, by class, and, by gender. We all carry this scheme of things. And also by, which era we grew up in and what is happening around the society in our times. I'm just going to pick up on a popular trope that's been around regarding our church, the Episcopal Church. It used to be said that the Episcopal Church was the Republican Party at prayer. Then it was said, no, it's actually the Democratic Party at prayer. I'm going to offer that it is neither. We are all people who come together to form one body of Christ, bringing with ourselves, our whole selves, how we perceive things and what shapes us. So, today, there are 4 objectives that I have. One is to distinguish between political and partisan. 2 is to introduce and affirm the theology of the common good. 3 is to possibly discuss the baptismal covenant as the grammar through which we understand politics. 4, affirm the role of individual conscience in your decision-making about elections. Note the words individual conscience, which plays a significant role in the Anglican tradition. Now, what I would like to do is briefly offer Aristotle as the dialogue partner for Thomas Aquinas. And Thomas Aquinas' dialogue partner is the Anglican divine Richard Hooker. And then talk about the role of the via media, okay, or the golden middle, the golden mean, which finds its roots in Aristotle. And then talk about the role of individual conscience, and then offer it for table discussion based on the reflection questions that I have put forward. The church is political. To be political is to be in the city. Polis is city. We live in Annapolis, all right? The city named after whichever Anne you want to take. The understanding of being in the city is not only rooted in, I alluded to it in the homily or the sermon today, in Jeremiah's prophetic book to the exiles about working for the prosperity of the city, the nation, the state. Remember, nation state, that concept only came after the Treaty of Westphalia, right? So there isn't a particular understanding of nation state that Jeremiah is working with. But there is an understanding inherent that creation, as intended by God, is intended to be good. And yes, there is the fall of humanity. And then the fall of humanity led to post-Garden of Eden, the post-Garden of Eden phenomenon. So the framework of understanding that is implicit in the Hebrew and Christian tradition is affirming the goodness of the world and working towards the wholesome goodness of the world so that it reflects the heavenly Jerusalem, the heavenly kingdom of God. So you start from Genesis and you end in Revelation, where you see the ultimate picture of the eternal God, of the eternal city, of a new heaven and a new earth. Now within that, though, because of the fall of humanity, we have something called the incarnation. The incarnation was all about God becoming human for the recreation or the redemption of the world. There isn't a separate secular and spiritual realm for God. That is a Gnostic understanding. In Jesus Christ, we see the perfection of humanity, and in seeing the perfection of humanity, we see the combination of what is good earthly and what is heavenly into one being. So incarnation is the framework in which Anglicans, Episcopalians, see our work in this world. Anglicans, I'm going to use the word Anglicans more than Episcopalians. We are part of the Anglican communion. Okay? Anglicans have seen this world as part of, seen the Christian vocation as living out the incarnate reality of Christ's sanctifying presence in working for the good of the world. So in that way, the church is called to be involved in all systems that affirm the inherent dignity of each and every human being, because we bear the image of the living God, right? Joe Leno and Father Dion, they'll probably talk about the fact that our understanding of the image and likeness, we have lost the likeness of God, that is the sin, and Augustine works on that, and he talks about reaffirming the likeness of God in what we do, and the political process as Christians involved in working for the good of the city, in addressing issues of poverty, of addressing the issues of any barrier that inhibits human flourishing, is to restore that ultimate likeness so that we can reflect more and more the peaceable kingdom of God. However, in doing that, the church should never take a partisan stand. I'm going to offer this something that is going to be pretty controversial. Maybe Father Dion is, I am not a public policy expert. Okay? I will say, I know poverty is sin. Okay? Poverty of spirit is sin, poverty of wealth is sin. But do not look to the priest to talk about which specific public policy prescription there is to solve poverty. That's why you have forums. That's where you have public policy networks that should be listening to a broad range of experts and people who are on the ground who can engage in civil Christian-oriented dialogue to formulate specific stance or public policy postures, if at all that's warranted. And I hope we can say that poverty is not something that we want. However, at the same time, within Anglicanism, the reason why you can have an Edmund Burke and a John Locke, for those political science geeks, together in one church, is because we as Anglicans also believe in the individual's power to use scripture, reason, being formed by tradition, to understand and to engage in dialogue and perspective about how we believe, or about how to affect what we believe. Does that make sense, or have I lost anyone? Okay. I can't say verbatim, but I will try to remember this. I'm going to be a little bit more informal than I thought. What I tried to say is the reason why the Anglican tradition is so broad and can have people like Edmund Burke and John Locke together in one communion is because we, along with the theology of the common good, we give space for the individual to use their conscience, which is shaped by the power of the Holy Spirit, to make particular decisions. Lost anyone yet? Now, our individual conscience is shaped by Scripture, the reading of Scripture, in community, in the daily office, as individuals. And it's also shaped by tradition, the tradition that has gone before. Especially with the 1979 prayer book, there has been such an emphasis on the early church, looking to church saints like John Chrysostom, Gregory of Nazianzus, who have written extensively, by the way, on the Christian vocation and what it means. to be a Christian, in the world against the empire in many ways. So if you want some source documents, I can give you a source documents on Nazianzus, on John Chrysostom, whose work can be considered overtly political. Okay? And then, by reason, we believe that reading Scripture, being informed by tradition, shapes how we are to perceive and reason out individually and communally how to live in this world. Have I lost anyone yet? Okay. Now, all of this is based basically on the theology of the common good, okay, which, finds its philosophical roots in Aristotle. Aristotle talks about, the polis as, and I'm looking at Tom May here and all the experts who went to St. John's, here, who can correct me. But the political sphere is not something to run away from, but deeply engage because it is rooted in virtue. Right? To be a person of virtue is to engage in the polis, in the city. And we bring the virtues in how we engage in civil dialogue. Now, of course, people who had a chance to shape, the polis in those days are very much different from who gets a say today, thankfully. But that theology was appropriated. So Christian theology, by the way, is a spirit-led reflection, as it has evolved, on existing thought patterns. Okay? So Christian theology doesn't work, in a vacuum. It always has a conversation partner. And Thomas Aquinas' conversation partners were Maimonides, okay? And Maimonides' conversation partner was Aristotle. They're deeply rooted in the work of Aristotle. And being rooted in the work of Aristotle, Aquinas develops the notion of the common good. And Hooker, in the work that Hooker is doing in the laws of ecclesiastical history, is trying to live out in an incarnate way what it means to be a civil politic that is loyal to church tradition and yet ever reforming, being engaged, not running away from what is happening in history. It is deeply incarnational. So in that way, the church has never sought to distance itself from the polis. Because to distance oneself from the polis or from the realities of the world would be to negate incarnation. Okay? And the heresies that erupted in the church went the other way. They separated the spiritual from the secular, hence Gnosticism. Any questions so far? No. Have I lost anyone? I think I've lost myself, which is kind of, yes, Marshall.
The question is, where does monasticism fall in all this?
Great.
It seemed to have been running in those early times for a shelter. And so that would take you away from the polis.
Absolutely. So there are different, first of all, monastic movements would be the most appropriate way to say it. There are various monastic movements. So you have Anthony in the desert, who is certainly running away from the polis, right? But then you have the other extreme of being engaged in the polis. But so the Benedictine sensibility, though, has never, which is an appropriation of Anthony in that tradition, is never to run away from the polis, but to work and labor and order one's life based on the trifold order of prayer, of sacrament, and of work. right? So that order comes as part of how monastic tradition in the Christian sense evolves. Because if you take a look at monasticism, so you have Anthony, and you also have Buddhist monastic movements that are happening in the other parts of the world, which is totally about negating life negation, or moving towards a different understanding or worldview of how they view this earth, right? So you have these two traditions, and then the Benedictine sensibility, which shapes Anglicanism in a deep way, is all about prayer, work, and engagement in society. So that's how that works. Any other questions? Yes, Francis. Yeah, why don't you ask away? Maybe a dialogue would work better. Great. Right. Well, so I'm going to deviate from Hooker, and I'm going to suggest that the common good is always linked to Christian virtue, for our purposes, to Christian virtue. Okay? Now I'm gonna water it down a little bit more before getting specific. I would say that, for instance, we as Episcopalians are shaped by the Book of Common Prayer. Okay? If you take a look at so we are people who are called to pray what we believe, and we believe what we pray. Now, in being shaped by that, the common good is listed in our manner of praying and in the baptismal covenant. Okay? So when we take a look at the baptismal, I don't have a prayer book with me. I have one in my pocket. Sorry. But if you take a look at the baptismal covenant, okay, when it says to seek the dignity of each and every human being, there is a common good, a common understanding of what the Christian church's vocation is. Now, to seek the dignity of an individual means inherently to seek the individual's flourishing. Now, we can debate what the means or how to allow people to flourish, right? So there are some public policy debates, let's say, that would skew on eradicating, all sort of barriers in terms of college admissions, okay? There's another perspective that will say, well, no, we need some affirmative policies to address systemic issues. But if you take a look at the deep core debate, so Alistair McIntyre, who taught at Notre Dame, talks about something called the interminability of debate in modern times. Because we have been so shaped and by extreme individual preferences that we can't even come to agreement on what the virtues and values are, right? So, in many ways, McIntyre goes back to Aristotle, etc. But I would posit to say that as Episcopalians, we have the Book of Common Prayer, and we also have specific discussions at convention which shape how we perceive what the common good is. Then the question would become, that's why it's important, for instance, that you elect delegates that represent the whole broad policy perspectives of the body, right? So hopefully, shaped by a Christian understanding, Christian teleological understanding, they may deduce and interpret what the common good based on that. Yes, Marshall.
So how would you integrate Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism? Greatest good is a great question. What is the optimal? Is it an
Well, so utilitarianism, Darwinism play hand in hand, and if that is taken to a logical extent, people who are mostly on the margins, specifically, just bear with me because I never expected a question on Jeremy Bentham, and I haven't read Bentham in 30 years. But Bentham and so the people who are on the margins, specifically those who are deeply, deeply differently abled, don't have the physical or mental capacities to fend for themselves, would be the most victimized, right? So the common good, always, when we talk about, Luke chapter 4, there is a specific policy or a specific overview of how Jesus' ministry is shaped. When we talk about the Sermon on the Mount, there is a decided perspective on how we are to view human beings, not as an end in and of themselves, but as reflecting, as being children of God. And the logical conclusion of a Benthamite perspective would not lend itself to that. But then again, I could be misreading Bentham because I haven't read Bentham in 30 years.
It just seems that our society has totally adopted Benthamism without name, but our belief seems to be that whatever is the greatest good, sometimes what is the greatest good of me. So, I will align myself with those people who will give me the best result politically, or will I align myself with those people that I think will produce the better society?
So the question is, given that there are different ways of looking at the world in this day and age, I'm gonna redirect the question into this framework. What does it mean to approach the ballot box? And I would say to approach the ballot box as an Episcopalian, as a Christian, is to bear the mind of Christ. Looking at things from the mind of Christ. And if we believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to shape our conscience, right? This is where belief in the power of the Holy Spirit to shape our conscience, and you can live into your individual conscience in who you vote for or what you vote for, that I would say is decidedly Anglican. Sue.
There's also the question of who is part of the commons. And, we've had some scripture where Jesus himself has redefined who is part of the commons. And for me, this is one of the biggest problems we're having in our country. Who do we include? Who is being excluded from the good of our country? Can you give us some guidance on that?
Well, I can give you a perspective, okay? And I guess I also am someone who leans heavily on individual conscience. I would say that we are called as Christians shaped in community who live our lives individually to bear the mind of Christ in seeing other people. That's the guidance that I would offer. I believe that in Jesus Christ, no one is excluded. Okay? No one is excluded. And if I believe in that way, in that perspective, it is incumbent upon me to see other human beings with that sort of dignity. And, you know, Mike Creighton always tells me this thing that he learned in seminary about, you know, do unto others as you, you know, as you would have done to you is the greatest challenge of humanity. Is Mike Creighton here? Yeah, he is. He reminds me of that all the time after an adult forum. And I believe that is true. I think the problem, we all, see, like I said before, we all have our baggage, the way we perceive things that is shaped by class, by gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we use those biases and filters in analyzing the world situation. Now, how about, so there's a, I wrote my, yeah, this is now going back a lot. I wrote my undergraduate thesis on a guy named John Rawls. Anyone hear of John Rawls? Yeah, John Rawls. So John Rawls talked about something called a veil of ignorance. Does anyone remember that, a veil of ignorance? Yeah. Joe, can you explain what the veil of ignorance is?
I think he's talking about that we have comprehensive doctrines that we all. Rawls, who's a modern political philosopher, talking about that we all have comprehensive doctrines that we disagree about, whether it's theology, philosophy, or anything. And so when we come to each other, we go to, I think the veil of ignorance is meaning we put all those comprehensive doctrines aside, and I forget the rest of that, and reach some kind of, you take it from there.
So mitigated compromise, engagement, civil engagement. Yeah. So civil engagement is about, imagine we all put on a cloak on top of ourselves and had extricated all our prejudices, our inclinations, our habits. It's sort of a take on Kant. And the theory is that we should be able, if we're all under this veil of ignorance, to engage in a fruitful dialogue and compromise. But guess what? We can't put on a veil of ignorance. We're all embodied human beings. That is the theology of incarnation, and recognizing the embodiment that we all have, its possibilities and its limitations, its striving to live into the image and likeness of God, and yet the reality of sin, and how that reality of sin sometimes skews how we perceive other people and other things, is necessary, right? So, you know, when we engage in this understanding of the common good, whether it's based on the virtues of society, the virtues of the Christian gospel, or it means, you know, it definitely necessitates that we take a step back and examine ourselves, use the spiritual disciplines in the examine. You know, there's the daily examine, if for those who are in that sort of monastic view of, at the end of the day, really examining all your actions and all your thoughts. By the way, that's the longest prayer time in my life because I get it wrong all the time. So I'm examining all the time. But so perhaps the Ignatian, an exercise before we hit the ballot box is to do and engage in an examination of the self and self's motivations. Here's the beautiful thing. That is an exercise that we must do individually. But there is a corporate aspect to this. The corporate aspect is we tend, so I worked at the cathedral, I ministered at the cathedral in Cincinnati. And all around, it was 2016, okay? And all around, and Cincinnati has per capita the largest Appalachian diaspora of any city in the United States. There is such a layering of prejudice that people have. And it became so toxic that people who worshiped together, ate together, were in foyer groups together, after the 2016 election, would not have a conversation with each other. Is that Christian or demonic? If you are not able to have conversations, despite disagreements, I would venture to say that that's powers and principalities that are not of Christ in the world. If we are evaluating and judging people based on how they vote, or how we perceive their vote to be, there is something deeply askew, deeply anti-Christian in that. Not that all behavior is excusable. That's a different conversation, right? All behavior is not excusable. And when you move out of the civil behavior and engage in vitriolic behavior that denigrates the common good, that is to be called out on again. I know we are a part of ACT. ACT originally was part of the Industrial Areas Foundation. The Industrial Areas Foundation, there was a mantra that I learned in IAF training 20 plus years ago. It's this: in any sort of community organizing, there are neither permanent enemies or permanent friends. Think about that. No permanent enemies, no permanent friends. So allies on one issue, okay, may not be allies on the other issue. And if that is the case, that offers us as the church, I would say, to keep a distance. Now, I know that I'm sitting in an audience that there are committed Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I know all of that, okay? And I love St. Anne's because of that diversity. But I will say that if we start labeling and judging people based on their political party and affiliation, there is something deeply, deeply sick in that. And that sickness, theologically, is sin. Anyway, I've gone on enough. I have table questions for you. I'm going to invite you to actually have conversations. And let me read the questions. How does the Christian faith inform your perspective on humanity's role in the polis, or the city? Okay. What scaffolding do you use to distinguish between politics and partisanship? So that is, basically Sue's question in that way, right? I'd like you all to answer that. What should be the role of the Christian faith in addressing matters that make an impact on living into our baptismal covenant? Okay? So we'll have about 20 minutes, 15 minutes to answer these questions, and then we'll reconvene. Okay? Do you all have copies of the question? Yes, no, maybe. Do you all have questions? Yeah? We're good. And then, yes. Okay. So we have some questions there. So engage in and I'm going to say if y'all can make one table, it makes for a more fruitful conversation. Thank you. So are we clear? We're just going to talk about the conversations, introduce yourselves, get to know each other. That's part of civil conversations, and then let's talk. Friends, I'm going to give us 2 more minutes to wrap up. Friends, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you all for these discussions. Let's come back together in the larger group now.
So basically, here we have the next 5 minutes. Yeah, to end discourse and do what we need to do. No, to continue the conversation. But if there's anything that really came to the fore as you engaged this conversation, I'd love to hear what came to the top of mind. Or if there were any questions, concerns, anxieties. Yeah, Cindy.
I've wondered ever since, well, forever, probably for 25 years, as I've seen the nature of our information change. I grew up with Walter Cronkite and really preferred just the facts. Now, as Christians, the information we receive, which is just like a bombardment, how do we as Christians look at the information we receive and know what is real, what is from God, and what is not? And I taught English for a number of years, and one of the things that we always stressed was original sources. So as a Christian, I can open my Bible. But as a person in the world trying to understand the information I'm receiving to help me make decisions, how do I know what I'm receiving is true?
Great question. Great question.
Mouth of people that are
Yeah, Katie, is that? If people want to respond to that, I mean, that'd be lovely. Yeah, no. I think we all are. So we have gone from 3 news sources, right? Actually, it's funny. When I was in college, a long time ago, they did a survey of students in the Ivy League. Okay, ostensibly the really smart individuals. They did a survey to find out if they knew who the Prime Minister of England was. I don't know if any of you remember that survey. Only 7% of people surveyed in the Ivy League answered correctly. Okay? Think about that. So, in a day and age where people are not civilly and politically engaged, and those who are tend to ossify into different camps, there's always something called verification bias, right? If we hear something that aligns with our preconceptions, we are prone to think that is correct. And the shift, right? The shift from that verification bias has become increasingly difficult. But that doesn't really solve the problem. I think the only way to solve the problem is actually to go back to root sources of the story, okay? And to really check out the credibility of the story, right? So with Slate and all these I'm talking to the newspaper man here, the journalist here, with all of these online publications, and with everyone carrying a camera and creating their own media outlets, you are seeing the division, the shattering of what is truth into different lens. So it's up to us as people engaged in the polis, again, Aristotelian, to actually look deeper into the sources and see which is credible and which is not. But then again, there's another problem with that. If you've taken a look at the way our society has gone, is that even expert knowledge is considered suspect. Right? There's a deep suspicion about the experts. So I think we all need to examine our biases here, try to read in between the lines deeply, engage more deeply, and go to original sources. Katie.
So this is a question for everybody. At our table, we got so deeply into question number 1 that we discussed it quite a bit. We never moved beyond that. But then I looked at question 2, what scaffolding do you use to distinguish between politics and partisanship? And I was like, dang, that's a good question. So I wanted to know whether anybody talked about that. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, sorry. My apologies. Did anyone at their table discuss question number 2? And did they have a good answer? Because if they did, I would love to hear it. We didn't get that far, but I thought distinguishing between politics and partisanship is really important, particularly using a Christian lens to determine that scaffolding, and we just hadn't gotten there. And I wondered whether anybody did talk about that and what they said. Sorry, I talked so fast.
Yeah, we talked about it, and I think what we said is that politics is more about values, and partisanship is more about kind of tribalism and sort of labeling people, and that when you approach politics, it should be sort of broad values that aren't necessarily conforming to particular ideological groups necessarily. And that partisanship is sort of more about labeling people, and maybe you feel like, this is my tribe, I have to conform my views to this group because these are my people, these are the other people, we oppose them. So it's sort of a pushing away, and it's not as much driven by sort of the underlying values that may cross and transcend those typical partisan divides. And also kind of goes to the issue of no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, that, I think too often in the partisan dialogue, it's sort of like, these are the defining issues, those people disagree with us on those, so we dismiss them, they're the enemy. Whereas, in fact, there may be a lot of overlap on other issues across that partisan divide. And so it's just a tendency to dismiss and, frankly, vilify maybe the people that you tend to disagree with more, and then that gets in the way of the underlying values that may cut across those barriers. Is that more or less correct? All right. Sure.
Any other questions? Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I just wonder if this might tie in with the question that Cindy asked, namely, if we have the scriptures, and let's extend that maybe, and the fathers and mothers of the church as a very clear foundation, not simply of unanimity, but of real discussion about what it means to live a Christian life. What do we have in terms of politics? Well, once again, I think what we have are our founding documents, the Declaration, the Constitution, and also the wonderful discussion that is part of the Federalist Papers. And I was reminded of that particularly in what Stan was suggesting, namely in this whole matter of the difference between politics and partisanship. In Federalist 10, Madison worries greatly about faction and what faction can do to any social, political entity like the one that they're trying to rectify in the Constitution, which, of course, the memorandum for that project started here in Annapolis. The Annapolis Memorandum is what moves us beyond, ultimately, the Articles of Confederation, which was very defective, to the Constitution, which is a written founding document. And yes, there's lots of argument about that as well, whether you're a strict constructionist and so on and so forth. But the thing is, I think it's really crucial that that is, in social terms, the way in which the republic in which we live articulated its plan for ensuring a common good that did not self-destruct. And we're still working on it. Remember Franklin's famous remark when someone said, "What kind of government do you have?" And he said, "A republic, if we can keep it." And that's what I think all of us feel is a very live issue right now. But I think that it's there. And that's not to say that we find all the solutions in those documents. But I think we're reminded of what the basic principles are that started us on the road that brings us to where we are today.
This is actually not a question, it's more of a comment, an observation about difficult discussions and the way language works. And it comes back to me repeatedly that specific language plays a role in whatever the conversation is, if it's about a difficult topic, in this way. If we come into a conversation about a difficult topic and we don't take the time, as you did today, to define the terms that we're going to be using, it's very hard to get traction in a difficult conversation without that. So you took the time to define how you were using politics in the context of this discussion, and that allowed us to have that discussion. If you just came in and started talking about politics, is it that kind of politics? Is it the politics of how you get elected and what you have to do? Is it politics as in, I'm politicking now, I'm going to negotiate and do my way? It would have derailed the conversation entirely, and I think we run into trouble often when we try to have difficult conversations and don't bother to define the terms as we're going to use them in that context first. That's all, just an observation.
Thank you.
I am, let's see. The questions are for you. I think we can get them posted on Realm or any sort of outlet that informs you. But it's for you to pray with and to grapple with. I just want to say that politics is not a bad word. It is a redemptive word. We are called to be people in the world, but not of the world, as Paul says. And the way we engage and live out our faith in the world can make an impact in shaping the world to be that peaceable kingdom. I'm going to give it to Father Dion, and then I will close with a prayer. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Manoj. Just a couple, three things, brothers and sisters. This is just the beginning of the conversation that we're going to be having. As Father Manoj had said, these questions are for us to continue to ponder. There will be an open discussions next Sunday in which these questions will be part of the groundwork for the discussion that we will have amongst ourselves with more time, not just 5 or 10 minutes to rush through these things, but really to sink into them. I'd like to let you know also that on the 13th, Ken Langston is going to be talking about ethics, how we bring that into the ballot box. That was one of the questions that was brought up today. So he will do a deep dive on that particular issue. We're talking about how do we come together? How do we navigate our differences? This is just an ancient struggle amongst humanity. I'm doing a study at the Ecumenical Institute this semester on Romans. And one of the chapters that we're going to be looking at is chapters 14 and 15, where there is a struggle between those who are Gentile Christians and those who are Jewish Christians. How do they come together? Each one having their own perspective on who's right, who's the better person, who is the closer one to God. And so again, this is just an ongoing conversation that we have had for centuries. So that is something also to be informed about. We talked about a little bit about St. Augustine and his theology and his desire and understanding the church and being part of the city. He had a monastic world about him, which he decided not to go out into the desert and have, but to have his monastic community within the church, which is within the city. And so that idea of being within the city and having a concern for the world and what is going on with the people around him, that is part of his ideology, part of his theology, and something we can be looking at towards the end of October when we have the study of the city of God, which looks at the two cities, the city of God, the city of man, the city of heaven, the city of the earth. There's going to be a pamphlet that's available. There's going to be a sign-up sheet in the back of the room for you if you would be interested in getting that pamphlet, and we will order them for you. It will be essential for our discussion with the Reverend Dr. Joe Lenow, who will be with us on the end of October to specifically talk about St. Augustine, the city of God, and the ongoing struggles that he had and how that informs our life today. So again, this is just the beginning. It's going to go on all through the fall. We'll be ending up way in the spring with the study of Revelation, which Father Manoj alluded to, which also talks about the struggle of the city in the world and the city of heaven. We have some wonderful scholars being lined up to be a part of that discussion to bring more information to you. So be on the lookout for that. But again, this is just the beginning of a long conversation that we will be having about these issues and just the challenges and the joys. Lastly, I will say, we talked about the baptismal covenant, what we can do. If you go through the baptismal covenant, there's a list of promises, and everyone ends with, I will, with God's help, right? With God's help. So I will hand it over to Father Manoj.
Thank you all, and we don't need to put the tables and chairs away today. I think we're fine because we have a Legacy Circle dinner. I know we were all looking forward to doing that, but we can skip that for today. Can I invite you to stand as you are able as we pray? This is a prayer for an election from our Book of Common Prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, to whom we must account for all our powers and privileges, guide the people of our United States in the election of officials and representatives, that by faithful administration and wise laws, the rights of all may be protected and our nation be enabled to fulfill your purposes through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Happy Sunday. Good afternoon.